I'm honored to facilitate this panel and to learn from our panelists. I feel so lucky that I get to be here and learn from everyone and ask questions and create a space with everyone who's here. My name is Vivian Guevara. As Karma said, I'm an alum 2008 of Columbia School of Social Work. I'm a field instructor and I'm an adjunct professor. And I'm going to give a visual descriptor of myself. I'm less richly pigmented and I identify as Indigenous and Mexican, and I'm sitting on a lime green sofa with pillows and shades of green and a white wall behind me. My hair is pulled back in a tight bun, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck, and I'm sitting on unceded Canarsie land. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. We have Annemarie, Pérez, Gloria, and Isa Noyola with us today, and I'm going to pass it to you, Isa, to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isa Noyola. I am a transgender Latina Mexican woman who is currently in Phoenix, Arizona. I am originally from the Bay Area, San Francisco, Ohlone land. I have long black curly hair, brown skin. I am wearing my favorite brown shade of lipstick and bronze eyeshadow with mascara. And my background is a big heart on my left-hand shoulder. And I am the deputy director at Mi Gente.
Thank you, Isa, and welcome, Daphne. We're doing introductions now.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here with you all.
I'm going to pass it over to Annemarie to give you some time, Daphne. And
sure.
And yeah, thanks for being here.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Annemarie Pérez. I'm talking to you from part of the huge amount of unceded Tongva land. My chair here is in Santa Monica, California, and I am an assistant professor at Cal State Dominguez-Hills. I teach interdisciplinary studies. My fields are Latinx literature with a specialization in both Chicana feminist literature and digital humanities and digital pedagogy. I identify as Chicana. I also identify as Latinx. I look really light-skinned today. I'm light-skinned today, and I have dark brown eyes and brown hair that's cut in kind of a medium fade. And I'm cisgendered and wearing a pink and orange patterned shirt, sitting in front of a bookcase full of Latinx academic theory. Oh, I wear glasses.
Thanks, Annemarie. Gloria, can we hear from you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gloria. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I am currently in a friend's home. So I'm in Los Angeles, unceded lands of Tongva people. And I am the person behind Nalgona Positivity Pride. I identify as Chicana. I identify as Mexican Indigenous descent. I identify as an eating disorder, as a person that still struggles with an eating disorder, and so much more that I'll probably get into during the panel.
And Daphne.
Oh, my description. I'm so sorry. I have dark hair in layers, square pink eyeglasses, soft pink lipstick. Behind me is a kitchen, and to my left is a divider of a light wood color, and I have hoop earrings.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daphne Frias. I am coming to you guys from unceded Lenape territory in New York City, specifically West Harlem, so not too far from the School of Social Work. I am wearing a dark teal shirt. Behind me is a pink background. I'm also wearing pink and brown speckled glasses with some glossy lipstick on for some good flair. And I am excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much, everyone. So let's continue on that topic of identity that all of us have brought up, because so much of our identities can be rooted in the work that we do. So I want to ask, what communities are you rooted in? And how do your identities inform the work that you do? Anyone can jump in. If it's too quiet for too long, I might send it over to someone, but please feel free to jump in. Annemarie.
All right. I suppose my primary identity in some ways is rooted in my geography. I'm very much identify as someone who's Californian and someone who's from Los Angeles. My family has been here for 4 or more generations in some cases. And, I've led in a lot of ways a very provincial life. I even ended up working in the city that I'm from, which is very unusual for academics. I identify as Chicana and feminist. And as I've seen the identity of Latina, but even more so Latinx, and the way that it has connected communities, at least in the academy and among my students, I identify with that. And let's see, I'm a Doctor Who fan, so I go to fan conventions.
I'm gonna jump in if that's okay. And Annemarie, I'm with you there on Doctor Who. So I identify myself as a second generation Dominican American Latinx woman. I am a social justice youth organizer, primarily working on the intersections of disability justice, gun violence prevention, and the climate crisis. I fiercely identify myself as a proud disabled woman, and I say that I was born just as I'm meant to be. I always say if I was given the opportunity one day, miraculously, to get rid of my disability, I would never take the opportunity because it has made me exactly as I should be, and it's given me so many amazing qualities and strengths that make me who I am today, and I'm so proud of it. My disability, specifically is cerebral palsy, for anyone who's curious, which means I use a wheelchair full time to ambulate and zoom around. As I like to say, you can see me speeding down the streets of New York City on a daily basis. My work identifies me fully. I always say I am wholly accountable to my communities. So those communities being the Latinx community, the disabled community, and our women and siblings across the globe. I'm also an ambassador at the United Nations, as well as I run my own nonprofit for young people who to help make sure that our voices are heard in electoral politics, specifically using the power of absentee ballots and collecting those ballots as well. So I'm coming to you all today, having spoken at the UN for about 5 hours in different sessions. So it's been an incredibly impactful day of change making, and I'm so excited to end my day with you all.
Thank you for being here. Gloria, do you want to jump in?
Sure. When I saw this question, I thought about how my identities as a Chicana, as daughter of immigrants, as a woman of color, as a person with no college degree, and again, as a person still struggling with an eating disorder, it is because of these experiences that I've been able to create this platform out of just the basis of my story, right? And the experiences I have had, multi-generational experiences, right, of settler colonial gender violence, the racialization of my body and my family's immigration story, right? All of this has formed my relationship to food and my relationship to my body. And, by no means is my story unique, but it sets it apart in the sense that it's not the dominant narrative when we speak about eating disorders in mainstream culture, right? And so, because I'm not thin, I'm not white, and I'm not middle or upper class. And so, again, I have this platform, because my identity intersected, with food perceptions and the way I view my body and others view my body. So the need was already there. And so all I did was share my story with the world. And that initiated all of this for the past 7 years.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isa. I think this question is always so loaded, and I think I've been asked this many times, and I am always struck by like feeling like, where do I begin? How do I peel this onion? And because it's just like so many stories, right? Like I think about my ancestors, my abuelita, the journey that my family took to come to this country, as undocumented folks. I think the intergenerational trauma, the colonization, like there's just so many things to share. And, it's just like my entry point into this work, I think has always been around working class values and organizing communities and building power in communities. And I grew up in a church community in the Bay Area. My parents are actually evangelical Pentecostal pastors, currently still. And I grew up in the church, and it was primarily an undocumented community. And, that's where I've learned what kind of solutions look like outside of the state, of what it means to pull resources together, what safety looks like outside the system, what survival means. And I think, families organized as new families would arrive. And just always remembering how my home was like the hub of a lot of that, and the hustle and bustle of just organizing communities, although they didn't call it that, but that's what it was. And so a lot of people ask me, like, where did you learn all your skills, like, of organizing? And I was in the church, actually. And so I think about sort of when I started my transition process in San Francisco in the Bay, and it was just definitely like my first instinct was really to seek community, because I knew that would be my saving grace. I knew that I just could not do this alone. There was just too much stacked up against me. And knowing, even though I couldn't articulate it in words, but I could feel it. And so, and of course, as soon as I did that then uncovered like this whole other world of both that was beautiful and also very painful, of just understanding what the experiences of trans Latinas and trans women of color, Black trans women, Latina trans women, which is so filled with so much violence. That violence surrounds our experience so much, and death. And I think, to me, when seeing my friends and folks passing every year, going to countless vigils and funeral services and protests that I think to me, I'm trying to think of the word in English, but me impulsó, it really motivated me to really like just not just only mourn and mourn their deaths and honor their deaths as they became ancestors, but really to fight like hell, you know. And I think to me that's the commitment that I have, that always like holds steadfast in my heart of why I do this. And so much of my identity is in that, you know, tradition of fighting trans women who've led so much of this work and the movements across, you know, building a vision of liberation for all of us, you know.
Thank you. I'm over here mm-hing and affirming without my mic on. I wish we were all together so we could be doing this together. Thank you all so much. And you touched on this a little bit, Isa, of your activism and how that intersects with your own healing. And I'm wondering if all of you can talk about how your activism or your work contributes to your healing and to community healing, or how you bring that into your own healing spaces. Gloria, can you respond?
One of the things I try to cover in my work is non-mainstream ways of dealing with eating disorders. And I always share that healing is within the community. And for thousands of years, you know, our ancestors didn't heal in these institutions. And not to say that they're not needed or that they're bad, no. But I'm more interested in expanding that conversation of how then do we build this necessary community that is anti-weight stigma, that is addressing food prisons in our communities, that is addressing eating disorders, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, all my community comes from this work. Now that I think about it, if I didn't have MPP, I wouldn't have this amazing set of friends that I have who have brought me so much joy and have brought me a lot of love, you know. And similar to Isa, I grew up heavily religious. I was raised Jehovah's Witness. And so, you know, a limiting belief that I had then was, once I leave, I'm not going to have authentic, safe people in my life, because I was told at such a young age that this is your community and that's it. Everybody outside is worldly and therefore bad, right? And so in some very weird way, I internalized that, and MPP in the community that has always been there for me, even as wild and all the mistakes that I do, and maybe I say the wrong thing sometimes, you know, it's just part of being human, right? But they're there, and you know, I recall this one time I got stranded in the Toronto airport. I got held back by U.S. Customs, and I saw them all laugh at my merchandise that I have for Nalgona. There was like 5 of them around my suitcase, and I was just really scared. And it was people that didn't even know me, that know my work, that came and supported me and helped me, you know. So it's been very beautiful to see people who are in the radical community, who are progressive, who are fighting for the liberation of the most marginalized, be there for me, even when they don't know me, right? And I think about before COVID, when I would hit the road, I would do my own like speaking engagements and find spaces in the community, and people would house me, would lend me their bed for the night to sleep. And anyway, so yeah, there's so much beauty within community, and I just very thankful.
I'm gonna jump in if that's okay. So for me, I think paramountly, my organizing is healing. Like, that is the way that I replenish my spirit and make it through the darkness that is existing in a capitalist society. And for me, I live my life and organize my work by a motto, which is to spread light where darkness dwells. Every day, waking up and leaving a little granules of light wherever I can and wherever I speak. And I always say it doesn't have to be anything radically big. It doesn't always have to be a march or a rally. It can be as simple as, texting your friend in the morning, hey, I'm thinking about you. How are you doing? Making, your mom or your family a cup of coffee, letting people know that like you are connecting on a human level. And that's your consciousness is conscious with them. For me, I think my organizing has been liberating in the sense that like finally I have helped my community realize that their voices matter and that it's okay to be loud and proud, and we don't have to hide anymore. We don't have to be scared or cautious. In 2019, I ran for an elected position in my district. So I am County Committee Woman of District 7 in Manhattan. And it's been one of the greatest gifts and pleasures of my short but full life. And during my time as County Committee Woman, I've instilled a lot of public health infrastructure within my community, myself being a public health scholar and on my journey of getting my master's in public health, really talking about environmental racism and how environmental racism plays a part into how Black and Brown communities specifically experience a huge brunt of the climate crisis. And when I was growing up, like, what was the climate crisis? Like, my family wasn't talking about that. And it wasn't until I went to a predominantly white institution for high school that I realized, like, wait, the community that I'm living in is radically different from that of like privileged people. It was like, for the first time, I saw more than one supermarket in a 10-block radius. And like, I saw fresh produce and access to school supplies and all of these things that like I thought the way I was living was how everybody else was living. And it was a huge wake-up call. So I wanted to bring that knowledge and education to my community. And since winning my election, I've helped my community to begin letter writing campaigns to Congress and actually use their voices, write letters to their elected officials, and begin a more sort of open dialogue with them and help them understand that, our elected officials are accountable to us and not the other way around. Kind of bringing back the opposite of the subverted system of politics that we have currently. And it's been a great joy to see we have a council of what we call a council of elders that I created, and it's all Hispanic women, immigrants who have been here since coming from their islands, tough as nails, abuelitas who say, okay, this is what we want in our community, this is what we're gonna do. And they sit there for hours with their grandkids translating letters from English to Spanish, saying, I don't care if I can't speak your language, you're gonna hear my voice and you're gonna know who we are, you're gonna do something about the problems that we're facing in our community. And it's just been the most healing experience. And just sitting on the wings of my ancestors, my abuela and abuelo, who I know are always with me. And I think my culture, my heritage has also been a huge healing point for me, and understanding that like you're never alone, even if your closest family members are not with you, ingraining in that culture that we come from giants, and because of them we're able to achieve greatness. So I'm grateful for that. And yeah, thank you.
Annemarie or Isa?
Oh. No, I'm sorry. I'm kind of marveling at everyone else's responses, because I actually, and you know, this is something that is a problem in the academy and among faculty, is we don't talk about healing very often and spirituality. And that's really a problem, because one of the things that's both been my own experience and that I've seen in the experience of my friends is that the process for people of color, particularly women of color, of going through a PhD program is harrowing. And it's a years and years long infliction of trauma. And in my own case, by the time I finished my PhD, I was in a terrible mental state. I actually had undiagnosed bipolar disorder that I had apparently coped fine and then not. And it was a combination of two things really that was incredibly important, which was getting away from the overwhelmingly white gatekeeping behavior that was going on in my department in discipline, my department when I was a graduate student. Actually, three things. And getting into communities of women of color, particularly academic women of color, and hearing their stories and realizing that this wasn't me, that this was institutional racism and sexism that I had experienced, you know, as literally the gates were trying to keep me out. And so knowing that I had a community of people who had experienced this and didn't think that I was crazy, even though I had been diagnosed as mentally ill, and it was absolutely true. I had a very, very good psychotherapist and psychiatrist who was a woman of color who helped me incredibly. And in the end, though, the most ongoing healing I experience is from my students, because I teach at a majority minority campus. My students are overwhelmingly Latina and African American women. And for years, I was having my students call me Annemarie. And a group of them came to me my third year and said, no, you know, you have a PhD and there's almost no one like you who has a PhD. You know, you're Dr. Pérez and you need to own that. And I started just sobbing because I'd never thought of myself as you know, my self-esteem had gotten so low. And so, yeah, you know, I think I find my spirituality in my students and in being the opposite of gatekeeping. I feel like I have a little act of revenge every time one of them graduates. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And there's definitely a lot of questions about academia in what people sent in. So I thank you for addressing that. Isa?
I guess just to kind of add a little more is just, I mean, I think all of us on this call and just so many organizers and folks that are engaged in transforming communities the work is in organizing people is about creating possibility, right? And igniting that sense of possibility, what you know, that is not dictated by the state, that is not just so situated within a stronghold from the state. And I think to me, that is we're offering gifts along the way. And that sense of possibility is what really kind of drives and motivates so much of our work, whether it's, you know, in grassroots organizing or in advocacy or fundraising or education. You know, I think we are all trying to follow the string that we've been following that have been set by our ancestors. Like so much of our work is rooted off the backs of so many folks who really put so much on the line, that articulated a vision for liberation for all of us. And I think we're moving those pieces and we're doing the best we can. And in that, I think we might see some of those, possibility models and spaces open up, and some we might not. But I think as we see that with other folks, as it materializes, whether it's on social media or whether through connections and relationships, we see, like Daphne was sharing, that, we're estamos dejando un granito de arena, like we're leaving a bit of ourselves, and, that hopefully can continue to manifest and translate and be shared across.
Thank you so much. And on that line, and I love the way you describe the line or the thread that runs through us, and the little bits and pieces that are left with us and that we leave. I think this is my question, because people do their DNA tests and they do their lineage tests and learn maybe things they didn't know about themselves. And beyond that, or before that, or maybe after that, how did you learn about your own history? Whatever that means to you. And or how did you learn about the history of Latinx, Latine communities in this world? And I ask that again, that's my question, because I didn't learn until I was well into my 20s. And that's one, because nobody's taught that in schools here. And two, my family did not know that history either, or did not teach it to me. So it's something I had to do on my own. So I'm wondering about you. How did you learn that history or seek it out? And how did you learn about the history of Latinx, Latine, Hispanic people around the globe?
I'm gonna jump in if that's okay. So for me, I think actually my disability is what allowed me to search for my culture, because I understood from the very beginning that society viewed me as different. And unlike other people, I thought it was super cool to be different. I'm like, yeah, no one's like me. I'm just gonna live my life being myself. That's amazing. And when I was growing up, my great grandpa was still alive. He was born in 1917, lived in DR almost all his life. And the stories he would tell me, the first time he ever saw an airplane, and just things like that were so magnificent and amazing. But I think for me, I wanted to figure out all the other things that people decided made me different. And I knew that one of those things was my culture. And I didn't learn how to speak English until I was about in first grade. And I always asked my mom when I was going to school, why did, when the schools would give us announcements and handouts to bring home, why did they automatically assume that we needed those papers in Spanish and they wouldn't give it to us in English? And thus began the conversation of stereotyping and what does that mean? My mom also has a foster care background, taking care of foster care children and placing them into new homes. So her background of her own type of social justice work really informed that for me. But I was always a kid who was very isolated from others because I had a lot of health issues and I was in and out of the hospital. So the way that I found companionship was by looking back into our history and learning more about where my family comes from specifically, but then also where do Hispanic people in this country, how do we identify and what have we done? And it was really through reading and learning and conversating, getting more deeply into the roots of Taino culture and understanding my Indigenous backgrounds, working with the United Nations to restore the language of the Taino people and learning bits and pieces of our native language. Those things have been incredibly rejuvenating to me. And I think the spark that really brought it home was realizing that the idea of minority is something that is taught to us. It is taught to us to believe. And while, yes, being a minority does mean that we face challenges as a community, if we come together, we can be unstoppable. And I really wanted to take the knowledge that I learned about nuestra cultura and be like, guys, we have such rich history. Like, why don't we use all that amazing power from our ancestors and do something amazing? So a big proponent of my work is working with Latinx young people and being like, yes, we live in a country that's very decisive and can make you feel afraid of your culture, but your culture is one of the most powerful tools that you have to instill change and to make your mark. So be proud of it and embrace it. And I'm so glad that I did.
Annemarie, would you like to jump in?
I think in terms of my family, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. I was the first grandchild on one side and the first grandchild that my grandmother spent very much time with on the other. And so now, whether it's history or mythology is a whole other thing, because one of the things I've realized is that the elders in my family who are long gone like to make things up. So they told the stories that they thought were interesting, that they wanted to hear. So, but that's fine. My dad in particular, it was a lot harder to get information out of him. And one of the things I asked him, because he's bilingual, is why he didn't speak Spanish to my sister and I, because my parents have very much the 1960s civil rights marriage. My mom is white, Irish, and American Irish, and my dad is Chicano. And I thought maybe it was that my dad didn't want to leave my mom out of conversations, but she's like, no, I kept trying to get him to speak Spanish to you. And then as I talked to him, I realized that his parents and grandparents had been told not to speak Spanish to him, that he had been essentially punished for it in schools, and he didn't see speaking Spanish as an asset. And so, and that's true across my generation. All of us who have any Spanish at all, it is something we learned at school. It was never spoken to us at home. And in my case, it was never spoken at home. And I think, I went from feeling angry that I didn't have Spanish to recognizing the violence that had happened, that had taken the language away from the generations before me. So, and even now in Los Angeles, you can't get an accent mark on your birth certificate. There's so all of that, the enye, the accent, it all gets erased just by being born here.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Daphne, as well. Such powerful stories. And I'm like, my head is swimming because I'm like, oh, I resonate with that. I resonate with that. Gloria and Isa, would you like to jump in?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. The question is, how did you learn about your own history And or how did you learn about the history of Latinx, Latina communities in the world?
Well, for me, it was interesting hearing Doctora Pérez speak about, the learning Spanish and or now being able to learn it from family. And, for me, I grew up recognizing that I was Mexican, that I was Latina. And my father speaks Nahuatl. He's a native Nahuatl speaker. And I'm the first generation that it doesn't get passed on, but it wasn't until like my early 20s that I kind of started connecting everything as like, oh, I am Mexican indigenous. Like I think that's why for me, I have such an issue with that term for people who have similar backgrounds for myself, is that it disconnects you. And the indigenous side is othered. It's not connected to you, it's far away. And that's at least how it was presented to me, right? That I don't come from that. I thought Mexican was a race of its own, but it's a lot more complicated than that. So I think now that in my 20s, it was more of asking my father questions and my grandparents questions. And it's also been me observing my mother, who I think has more the European side, but her connection to land is very moving to me. Like, she knows how to work the land, how to grow chiles, how to tomatillos, how to take care of plants, how to pickle peaches. I mean, she could do it all, because she, my mom, it does have indigenous ancestry, but it's not so tied to language as my father. But now that I've come, have had this awakening of where I come from, and I start now recognizing the little native traits, right, that get passed on generation to generation. Even though, like, my grandfather, my mom's dad, was a very dark complexioned man, and I ask him, and he doesn't know. Like, I asked him, like, do you know if you have indigeneity? He's like, no. But like with my father, it's more like the connection to the language. And then later on, reading how the Nahuatls ended up in Michoacan, because that's where he's from. And anyway, so I feel like I it's not till more recently that I started valuing that and delving deeper, and also putting all the pieces together, because I also want to be mindful that I have a lot of privilege due to my skin complexion, and that I am mixed at the end of the day. Most of us are, right? But because of that mixture and the traits that are more aligned with white perversion, let's call it what it is, right? My life has been slightly easier in some regards, right? Like, I was having a conversation with my mom and my sister, and I was like, yeah, mom, like, I appreciate so much that, and because she's very traditional, but like, that you didn't ingrain in us racist, colorist ideas. And like, I told her, like, you never told me, like, oh, don't play out in the sun because you're going to get darker. And then my sister, who's darker than me, she said, well, my mom did tell me that, So again, I think when we're speaking about identity in our cultures, like, we have to look at everything, and we have to be careful before we jump into clinging to a whole identity, because we also have to be mindful about local indigenous people and how much we take up space, especially this is not necessarily physically our native land. And anyways, but so yeah, it's just been observing and trying to have these conversations with my parents. And I recall when in my early 20s, when I went to Michoacan, and where my dad's from, early February is when they have their big parties or holidays, and the rancho, as they say. and they still do a native dance. And it wasn't until more recently that I kind of started connecting together. I'm like, that's what that was. Like, so again, the awakening sometimes is very slow.
And just, I guess, to piggyback off that, I mean, I think the awakening is also the unlearning. So it's, to me, it's also been not just the learning, but the unlearning and undoing of all that we've internalized and not realizing that we have, you know? And so much of white supremacy is insidious because we are taught to believe things are to be true as, you know, as criminalization and policing and the nation state, you know, like so much of our identity is based on our labor and who we are and all those things, right? That's all white supremacy culture. And so I think, to me, the unlearning of how we value things, how we see things, how we relate to things has always been so important in terms of coming into my own. It was part of my, you know, part of my transitioning and thinking of outside of the gender binary is so much rooted in the unlearning and, you know, and really trying to move into more expansive ways to view gender identity and gender just period, right? And it has such a stronghold in our culture and in every civilization, not just this country, not just this US land. And so I think, to me, that is one of the biggest, that's like the first place that I started, you know, is the unlearning and undoing and really questioning why I held on to so many beliefs that I held so true and valued so much. And it was painful to undo that. It was to then, because then you are left in a place of really questioning, what is it that I really do value? How do I really understand my ancestors, and how do I understand the legacies that the ancestors have left, you know? And you know, it's heartbreaking to know that we might not ever know our herstories, you know, because of colonization, because of so much violence and erasure. And I think, to me, that is, just part of the journey of understanding and how to become whole. You know, it's like a lifelong task.
Yeah, I'm trying not to cry. Thank you so much, all of you. The unlearning, the great unlearning. Yes, I completely agree with that. I mean, when I talked about learning history, I feel like They Came Before Columbus is one of my Bibles, and I love the history of African and indigenous peoples of this land connecting before Europeans came and never being taught that history. And I think of how colonization has broken people of color apart and has tried to divide us in so many different ways over generations. And so my next question to you, and then we'll get into some of the questions that our audience has posed, is what do you do to, and this is actually from a person who submitted this in the form, what do you do to cultivate solidarity and collaboration with Afro-Latinx communities and with Indigenous communities? And I'll add in with Black communities who don't identify as Afro-Latinx communities.
I can start quickly, but I mean, at least for me, I am so blessed to have been raised in such a diverse area in San Francisco Bay Area, and even in the church community, understanding, you know, Latinx communities it was never like Mexican centric as so many other folks have experienced, you know, and it's so heavy, right? That I even though my family is Mexican, my mom from Comitán, Chiapas, and my dad from San Luis, and grew up in the border of Laredo. Shout out to Laredo. I see a lot of folks from Laredo. You know, I grew up in a community that was just super, super diverse and saw, you know, understood culture in a very complex, nuanced way of like the food, the music, folks from Central America, the Caribbean, and the range of color that it just, to me, that's our community, that those are our people. It didn't look a certain way for me in my experience. And I think, so I had a very unique experience because as I started to travel, and organizing, just so much of it is rooted in people's particular sort of regions and how they think about their neighborhoods and how they, understand their worlds, and so I think to me Latinx is not the perfect word. Like Hispanic is a problematic word. Like there's whatever names we're using for ourselves there's tinges of problems and questions and just so much what's underlying underneath and holding up that to be true. So to me, I think understanding the diversity and the richness and the individual histories is really important to learn, not just to understand what like those how those are unique, but also just in understanding the impacts of colonization throughout all of the Americas and all of, just where all the ways that it manifested, right? And in that, how we've survived, right? How communities have survived so much, and there is so much power and wisdom in that. And I think to me, that is the place of when we think about anti-Blackness in how that's manifested in particular communities or in spaces, right? That it gives us then the courage to really understand and go deep and challenge it and think about not just what shame looks like in that moment, but also what it means to be proactive and actually what it means to be pro-Black, and that to me, that is the sort of switch that that muscle that we're needing to really exercise is like not just staying in that place of shame, but also what is really motivating us to do better? What is really motivating us to actually have healthy communities and whole communities? And so much of it is at stake, as we've seen this week with the crisis at the border and how Haitians have been brutalized. And FYI, this is not like folks from Haiti have been migrating to the border and have been in deplorable conditions for a minute now. It's not new. They didn't all of a sudden just appear. And so that crisis has been, I'm glad the media is starting to really shed a light, but that crisis and organizations have been working with Black community, Black migrants for a minute now. So I think to me, there's so much to be done. There's so much devastation that has happened, and there's so much on the line that, right, we can't just stay in this theory place of conversation,
For me, and thank you, Isa, for bringing up the Haitian crisis, because as a Dominicana sharing my island with Haiti, I did not realize growing up how much anti-Blackness I was taught. And even the terms, the colloquial terms that we use to identify Black people, like I didn't even realize that those had racist undertones and backgrounds. And I was using them because I didn't know any better as a kid. And for me, this process of understanding that we are not enemies, like we share our culture, we share our history, and there's a reason why we share an island together, and that the border between our islands is not real. Like that's something that was put there because Dominicans have always wanted their proximity to whiteness. We have strived so hard for so long to just try to get as much of that proximity to whiteness as we could, that we ended up alienating one of our greatest allies and our siblings in the process. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is, even in my own family, having tough conversations about anti-Blackness and being like, hey, mom, like, that's not cool. Like, we don't talk about things like that. And, the things, over my mom's lifetime, trying to have her unlearn things that she's done for her whole life has been very difficult. But I think those conversations are paramountly important. Currently, for me, I run a community fridge in my neighborhood, and we serve a lot of Afro Latinx individuals and communities. And something that I was doing before the pandemic hit is actually to bring Dominicans and Haitians together, which in itself can be very problematic. But I think helping them see that they have more in common than they do differences, I think that's like, that is the goal of the state and the system, to otherize each other so that we can no longer be allies with each other, because they know that the moment we realize that we have so many commonalities and we come from the same root, their power is gone, or their power over us is gone. So, and I think it's also about learning my own Afro Latinx identity and understanding like where my people and my family come from, and understanding that we have those roots as well. So, and even in something that I was seeing happen a lot when the Black Lives Matter movement was having its moment over the summer, was there was this like section of Latinx supporters that were saying like Hispanic people for Black lives, and there was this whole conversation about like how that's actually incredibly harmful, because it creates a division between the Hispanic community and Black people, and that those two identities cannot be mixed with each other, which is not true in the slightest. So I think this work really starts with having uncomfortable conversation, and know that this conversation is going to be one that we're constantly having. It's not just going to be a light bulb moment that, okay, all of the colorism, all of the remnants of colonization are just going to randomly disappear. It comes from, telling your abuela, maybe don't buy that whitening cream that we get at the pharmacy. Stuff like that were constantly ingrained in my childhood growing up, that I didn't realize were tied to racist practices, because they simply didn't know any better. So it's about speaking up and raising your hand and being like, just like Annemarie was saying that her generation didn't get the opportunity to learn Spanish, my generation, we have to be the ones to say anti-Blackness ends with us, and make a definitive stand and say we're no longer going to perpetuate the years and years of anti-Blackness that exist within our culture, because being anti-Black is being against our own people. It's being against us. That's something that I've never understood in our culture, how we can be racist to our own people. Even, for me, even other Dominicans who are darker than I am, there's always these racist connotations against them. So to understand that the symptom of otherism is actually working towards the benefit of the system, and they want us to continue doing that so that we can be separate from each other instead of being unified together.
The interrelationship of going back to my very provincial Los Angeles mindset, but that the relationship between Los Angeles's Black community and Los Angeles's Latinx, Latino, particularly Central Americano community is one that literally plays itself out on my campus, because Cal State Dominguez-Hills is located in Carson, which is South Los Angeles. And South Los Angeles and has historically been like part of the heart of Black LA. And Cal State Dominguez-Hills was a predominantly Black campus. And as South LA has changed and become predominantly Latinx, Cal State Dominguez-Hills, while still having the highest proportion of Black students of any of the Cal State universities, is still much more Latino now than Black, or Latina, really. It's mostly women. But the one of the things that's, and that's not comfortable. It's not comfortable for anybody as we focus, because as a campus, we were literally created out of the Watts riots. The campus was supposed to go somewhere else, and the governor came to South LA and said, we're going to put this university here. So and so I think for me, part of this is recognizing the loss, and recording the history on my campus, which, Los Angeles has a long history of forgetting who was where when. And so that's really important, but also helping my students who are growing up next to each other and who are involved in romantic relationships together, as mixed race couples. There was a whole fabulous Instagram project that was done a few years ago called Blaxicans, about these mixed race couples in LA or their children. And one of the things that comes out of my work is that, the civil rights movement and the Chicano movement were not separate. In fact, the first issue of the Black Panther, which was the newspaper of the Black Panther organization, and the first issue of El Grito del Norte, which is an incredibly important Chicano newspaper from New Mexico, were typed on the same typewriter. It belonged to Beverly Axelrod, who was the attorney for the Black Panther Party. So, our history has been put into silos where this is Latinx History Month and February is African American History Month. But in fact, we have had coalitions of people of color, of working class people from the beginning. And that's not to say there isn't racism and colorism. There absolutely is. But people have found common cause together and have had relationships where they love each other. And so recognizing that and celebrating that, as well as looking at the abuses that have gone on, I think is really important.
For myself, being in what is considered the body positive movement or body liberation movement, my role having a platform on Instagram has always been of representation of others, right? Of the most marginalized, and reminding people body positivity came from the fat Black femme and women labor. Like, that's where it all comes from. And a lot of us have learned to love ourselves because of Black fat women. And so I think for myself, being a non-Black person, it's being a better listener and being the student and staying open and stepping to the side to give the platform for, again, what I said, Black women, Black femmes, Black transgender folks, Black undocumented folks, et cetera, right? And so that's how I've seen my role. And, I think too, when it comes to food and body image, this is a very delicate subject for any marginalized group, but within Blackness, it needs its own space. And so I'm collaborating with two other amazing folks, Ilya from Decolonizing Fitness and Alicia from Black and Embodied, to host this additional online peer support group specifically for Black folks. And I think that that's how us as non-Black POC can be of service, and show up when we need to and step back when we need to.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Oh man, I'm so grateful to learn from all of you, and I can't wait to look up all of your Instagram handles if you're on social media. But definitely, Gloria, I'm going to be seeking you out. Don't mean to switch this too far away from where we were, and I thank all of you thanks, Chris, about 10 to 15 minutes. But we are speaking to, I think, a lot of students at Columbia School of Social Work. And definitely I get this question a lot as somebody who thought they were never going to get a bachelor's degree and now has a master's degree, but now realizes maybe I didn't need any of that. But anyway, that's my answer. But the question I'm going to pose to all of you is from an audience person. I'm wondering what your honest, in bold, opinions are on degrees, specifically social work. Do you feel that a degree is necessary to do the work that you do? Do you feel that it may have better primed you to do the work? Do you think higher education is a form of gatekeeping and an unnecessary hurdle for people with lived experience to get involved in the realms that they know best?
This question hits so close to home. Right now, I am an MD, MPH student at Johns Hopkins in the pandemic. And literally every single day I wake up and I ask myself, why am I doing this? And the answer continuously fluctuates. But to answer the first part of the question, do I think I need a degree to be a community leader, to be an advocate, to create change? Absolutely not. Your lived experience and your fire and your passion for whatever cause, and specifically for social work students, for whatever area of social work you may be going into. For example, my mom, she used to be a caseworker for a foster care agency, the Jewish Child Care Association here in New York City, had no bachelor's degree. And the only difference in her title from a caseworker and a case manager was one had a bachelor's degree and one did not. But she did the same work as people with bachelor's degree. She placed children into homes and helped them start their lives anew. One case specifically that I remember of hers was this young girl who had been returned from her foster family after living with them for about 6 years. This little girl thought that this family was going to adopt her, and she had finally found some sort of stability in her life. And then all of a sudden, one day, they gave her back to the foster care agency. About a week or so later, a lesbian couple came into my mom's office, and she thought that they were a perfect match for this little girl, and they wanted them to adopt her. But the foster care agency, and mind you, this was probably like 99, 2000, they were not sure about a lesbian couple adopting this girl. And my mom advocated for months and months and months, and they adopted her. She is now in college getting her degree, and she has had a wonderful life. Actually, one of the mothers ended up being one of my middle school teachers. The first day that I went into middle school, she's like, you're Josie's daughter. And I'm like, how does this lady know me? I've never met this lady before. And she told me the story of how my mom changed her life. My mom still doesn't have a bachelor's degree. She's a paralegal currently. But that didn't impact her ability to change somebody's life. And for me, the reason why I currently am in my program, becoming a doctor, becoming a master of public health, isn't so much because I feel like I need these degrees to validate myself. I feel like academic degrees make you validated in academic communities, but you don't necessarily need them to be validating yourself. For me, I'm finding liberation in attaining these degrees because I know that my ancestors would have never had access to be able to achieve higher levels of mastery and higher levels of degree. It's also sort of giving the system, like, you know, something back to them, because I know that when I was applying to medical school, admissions boards would very blatantly tell me that they didn't think I could be a successful doctor because of my disability. And I was ready. I was ready for the criticism. I've already been in clinical settings with patients, and patients have come up to me and said, "I don't want to see you because someone with a disability possibly can't be a doctor." And that's exactly why I do this work, and that's exactly why I'm getting these degrees, because we deserve to see ourselves in every level of academia, of every level of leadership. And some of the most amazing experiences I've had with patients thus far are Hispanic patients, are disabled patients who, for the first time in their lives, say that they see someone who looks like them, who speaks their language, who can understand their cultural backgrounds, treat them and hear them and see them. And that is absolutely makes the pounds of debt, the hours of studying, the everything worth it, because it is for them. So I challenge all of our students here watching today. You can decide how your degree impacts your community. You do not have to let the bounds of academia tell you what and how you can challenge the status quo of what it means to be an organizer, what it means to be a social worker. So yes, if you still feel called to, you know, continue your degree into that work, by all means, go for it. But understand that you have the power to choose how your degree and how your knowledge impacts your community. And you can go off to be the most amazing and powerful organizer that there is, with or without it. But know that it's important to ground yourself in why you're doing this work. Are you doing this? Are you getting your degree because society tells you that you need degrees to be successful? Or are you doing this because you're finding a way to serve your community through obtaining your degree as well?
I mean, just really quickly to add, I mean, I think a couple things that come to mind is so much. I've worked at, I was the deputy director at the Transgender Law Center, and I've also done direct service work at an organization that I founded in the Mission neighborhood of San Francisco called ELA, and working with case managers and social workers and advocates. And I think so much of my work in the very beginning of receiving fresh graduates and social workers and folks who've got their social work degree or from law school was to really kind of unlearn some of the things that the education field has taught them, and to kind of shake their reality a bit, and to really understand the grittiness and the complicatedness of this work, and that it's not so cookie cutter. And so a lot of it has been to make kind of that first year to really kind of complicate things for them and challenge the ways that they've learned how to approach this work. And my number one tip for folks is, like, in terms of the area of the field or the communities that you're a part of, is to really seek out the mentors and the elders and the folks that have been doing this work for a minute, to really understand the histories, the local histories, and the struggles and the nuances and the ways folks work, and, you know, the politics of it all, because I think that's really going to help ground you and find your North Star. Because I mean, this work, no one has a silver bullet answer. And so we're all doing our best, and we all need each other. So really to understand the context is really important. So if you don't have a mentor rooted in your community that you're wanting to work with, I would find one ASAP, even if it's online.
I'd like to take this and the question about white passing that came up in chat together, because for me, I mean, I obviously, to get hired as a professor most places, you need to have a PhD. But the fact is, the people I write about a lot of times, didn't go to college, and, degrees aren't even an issue. What my privilege is as someone who has degrees is not unlike the privilege I have by being light-skinned, is that unfortunately, I get listened to more than someone without those degrees. I get listened to more than someone who has a darker complexion. And that's absolutely wrong. But I have to own that and recognize it and use it in order to make sure that people are listening to the people without degrees, and that I'm not taking their ideas. And I think light skin privilege goes the same way. I can't pretend to, friends I know who are experiencing, horrendous discrimination because they're darker, that maybe it's not really because of that. I can't speak for them, because if I speak for them, it's saying they have a deficit. I have to do the work of making sure that people are listening to them if I can, and point to the things that they do, and not take, and that's how you avoid doing the white savior work. You don't see the people you're working with as having a deficit. You see them as having strengths that, in my case, I don't have. I needed the security of my degrees to give me the confidence. But that doesn't mean that the people who don't have them lack that confidence. They don't.
Well, I don't have any college degrees. I did a little bit of community college, but I just, feel that my life path now, I'm 30, hasn't yet been, I haven't had that option necessarily. And I have very mixed feelings as well. One that I get told different messages by people within the eating disorder, between like DIY punk and then the community activists, and they all have their opinions as to whether or not, like, should someone like me go back to school and finish up, and I don't think I have an answer. I will say though that doing this work the way that I am, which is rooted in community, and has allowed me to not be confined, right? Because, for instance, right now what I'm focusing on is harm reduction work within eating disorders, which is still a very radical and controversial concept in eating disorder world, right? Had I been a therapist, had I been a social worker, had I been anything else, I might not so easily be able to do that work, right? And legal liabilities and ethics and, blah, 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 right? So I think I'm in a very funky, but in a position that I could still do things in a way that maybe others can't. And I also feel that because I'm not necessarily in the academia circle, then I'm able to be more spread out in regards to who gets to learn about eating disorders in a way that's applicable to them and personable, right? So, so yeah, it's a mixed question, and I think some of the other panelists really nailed it. Is what type of work do you want to do? And for me, I think that had I been to school early on and continued, you know, in academia, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now.
Mhm.
So I always say there's more than one way to get to your destination, and you don't have to ask for permission to do your life's calling. So yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone on the panel. Thank you for closing us out, Gloria, with that. Awesome. You do not have to be constrained. You have the control over what you do. And I admire you so much for making that path. Thank you, all of the attendees. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Chris posted everyone's social media handles in the chat. I hope you took them down. I think he's sending them out as well. Again, thank you so much for being here and celebrating all of you today and going forward. Thank you so much.